Aloha and welcome to Island Connections. I'm Ibrahim Aoude. Hawaii's People Fund is our topic, and we have three guests who would help us discuss this topic. Nancy Aleck, she's the Executive Director of Hawaii People's Fund. Richard Rodrigues, he's the Grant-Making Program Coordinator of the Hawaii People's Fund. And Morgan Cooper, she is a grantee or represents at least an organization that was a grantee of the Hawaii People's Fund. So thank you all for coming, and we shall discuss that. Hawaii People's Fund, when it first came about, it was the People's Fund.
Yes.
So just like an interesting piece of information, what happened and why did you change the name, and when did you change that name?
Well, it's a part of our more recent history because we were founded in 1972 and incorporated as the People's Fund. At that time, there was another People's Fund in Philadelphia, and not too much later, there was a third People's Fund started in the New England area. So to avoid confusion over the years, as we started interacting with more progressive funds throughout the United States, I guess board members thought it might be easier to set ourselves apart by calling ourselves Hawaii People's Fund. And at a certain point, someone went down to one of the state offices and registered another, like, doing business as kind of thing. So we're known as both. We've tried to set ourselves apart in print and other ways as Hawaii People's Fund, but everybody was looking us up in the phone book and we were listed as the People's Fund. This is the first year we're now listed as Hawaii People's Fund. So try and not say the People's Fund too much, or people will look us up in the phone book under People's Fund and we're not there anymore.
Right. So that's good, but it's also interesting to know that the people have more than one fund. Yeah, like
yes, and
too many people's funds. Yeah.
And there are a number of them throughout the United States, and the ones that we work with most directly are all members of the funding exchange. There are 16, and some of the things that are unique to these funds is that we're regional. So there's a one also in New England called Resist. They're very similar to Hawaii People's Fund. They fund throughout the country. And there are other foundations that really help support justice and social change that fund throughout the country. Okay. But we are regional, so we only fund in Hawaii.
Yeah, that's interesting. We're going to broach this further. But I want to go to Richard. How long have you been with the People's Fund, and what do you exactly do? I mean, your role in the People's Fund, so that people who want to apply for grants and so on would be able to get that information that they might need.
Well, as you said, I'm the program coordinator for Hawaii People's Fund. I've been with the Hawaii People's Fund now for 11 months, and beginning in my second year very soon. I am responsible for two different kinds of areas. In one area, I talk to applicants, and I work with our grantees, and I help groups that are developing their applications so that they're very strong and clear with their language, and so that we understand what they are wanting to do without having to guess. I also work with our grant-making committee. These are volunteers who read the applications. I don't make the decisions. Nancy doesn't make the decisions. It's our volunteers that read applications and make the decisions on who's going to be getting a grant.
Yeah. So those volunteers, how are they? I mean, how do they volunteer? Are there some criteria for that? Could you?
Our volunteers are people that are nominated to fill a role in the organization. Of course, our board of directors are also volunteers, but for the grant-making committee, these are people who have some kind of on-the-ground activism history, or perhaps they're donors to the organization and they're also activists. And also we have people who have been involved in social change work for a while, and one of us or one of the members of the committee or one of the people on our board of directors says, you know, I'd like Ibrahim to fill out an application to be on the grant making committee, and you go through the process, you look at what we're looking for, you look at the documents and say, oh, I think I could do this. You know, I can commit to these number of meetings, these number of hours, and this many years commitment. And I understand what's required of me and what I'm supposed to bring to the work.
Yeah, that's good. I want to ask Morgan, since you are one of the most recent grantees, if not the most recent, right? And so tell me something about the process that you went through, and even before that, perhaps, how did you get to know the People's Fund, about the People's Fund, and, you know, were there trepidations in terms of you going and applying, or what was that whole process for you?
They're very scary to work with. No. I got involved with Friends of Sabeel. It's a global kind of network of people who are involved in this organization, Friends of Sabeel. And there's a North America, specifically a North America group of Friends of Sabeel. And here in Hawaii, we have specifically a Hawaii-based group.
What is that, the Friends of Sabeel?
Friends of Sabeel is an ecumenical organization that started in Jerusalem, and they are committed, they're a Christian group of people who are committed to kind of peace with justice in Palestine and Israel. And it was begun by Canon Naim Atik. And you know, a lot of good work is done by Sabeel globally, but here in Hawaii especially, that's what I'm more familiar with. And in 2006, I think maybe March of 2006, Friends of Sabeel organized a visiting tour for Jerry and Sis Levin, who founded Christian Peacemakers, a group that does great work in Hebron and in Bethlehem to a degree.
That's in Palestine, the West Bank.
In the West Bank
Jordan.
of Palestine. Yeah. Christian Peacemakers monitors Israeli soldiers and Israeli settlers that are in the Palestinian city of Hebron to try to minimize the violence that the Israelis enact in that city. And Jerry and Sis Levin, who founded Christian Peacemakers, were going around and speaking, and so they came out here to Hawaii. And through Hawaii People's Fund, the Friends of Sabeel group got the funding to bring Jerry and Sis Levin here. And that's when I became aware of Hawaii People's Fund, and also when I became aware of the activities of Friends of Sabeel. And so currently, Friends of Sabeel is one of the many groups and organizations that is sponsoring a symposium on Palestine that's starting in February 26th. It begins, and it's a 3-week-long symposium that has films, panel discussions, workshops, lectures, and it's an attempt to bring some knowledge of Palestinians and Palestine and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict here to Hawaii. So we needed funding, and I called up Nancy and told her the idea of the symposium and what the funding would be going for, and wanted to get some initial feedback on whether or not she thought that this project was something Hawaii People's Fund might be interested in, and she's very encouraging. So I looked into, through the website, the Hawaii People's Fund website, I looked into what was required of me in terms of applying and how the money could be used. And after getting a good sense of all of that, I downloaded the application and started working on drafts. It was actually quite an easy process. I just happened to be a perfectionist and a little intimidated by grant proposal writing. So got some help from some people who had experience before with Hawaii People's Fund, and then submitted that application. And Nancy was generous enough to give me some feedback on it, and then it was sent in as an emergency grant. My understanding is that Hawaii People's Fund offers 2 types of grants, and I applied for the emergency grant because the deadlines for the regular grant, I wasn't able to make those for this project. So it was quite a pleasant experience, and I have to say that getting the email notification that I was a grantee was pretty thrilling. I upset a few people on my floor with all of my shouting. Very excited.
Yeah. So Nancy, you fund projects like the one that Morgan applied for the Friends of Sabil, right? And so why would you fund such a program like the one that Morgan applied for? After all, it's Hawaii People's Fund.
Right. Well, we have a wide range of issues that we support, all under the rubric of justice and social change. And frequently people will bring up the issue of breadth versus depth.
Yeah.
Why don't you only focus on issues around the war or around economy or something like that? But social justice covers so many realms. Mm-hmm. And one of those is international solidarity. And I think part of the reason for having this series that the Friends of Sabil is sponsoring is to look at some of the parallels between the impacts of colonialism here in Hawaii, the lasting and living impacts to this date, and what's going on currently, and some of the historic issues in Palestine and Israel. If I'm not mistaken, those are some of the links to be made. So understanding what's going on in other parts of the world when it's related to justice is something that we would want to support for people here in Hawaii. Sponsoring this, if it were happening somewhere else in Palestine, would be not something we would consider, mm-hmm. because that's outside of our region. Mm-hmm. I did want to say one thing too about the experience of Morgan applying for these funds, because even though we actually just met face-to-face tonight, mm-hmm. We've spoken on the phone several times, mm-hmm.
because
she had other ideas for other projects that she was working with that she didn't get funding for, and I didn't even encourage her to apply. Mm-hmm. So, we're not an easy mark. It's not everything under the sun. Mm-hmm. But this was, definitely within the arena that I thought it had a good chance. And emergency grants are reviewed by our board of directors, as opposed to all the regular grants that come in at twice a year, mm-hmm. that the grant-making committee reviews. And the board of directors was very excited by the project. Mm-hmm. So.
Good. So, Richard, when you do grant-making, coordination, mm-hmm. for the program, you deal with the grant cycles, the regular grant cycles, or also with the emergency cycles, or the emergency grant? Sorry.
Mm-hmm. I work full-time for mm-hmm. Hawaii People's Fund, so I'm there all the time, mm-hmm. doing all of these different things. And I read the emergency grant applications as well, and Nancy and I talk about them often. Mm-hmm. As I said, I don't vote on them, as in this case the board does. Mm-hmm. Part of my major focus, though, is to be prepared for our semi-annual mm-hmm. grant-making cycles. We have 2 deadlines, mm-hmm. March 1st, just coming up very mm-hmm. quickly, and September 1st. So organizations that are interested in us, people are looking for grants all the time, so they can find our information on our website, hawaiipeoplesfund.org. And if they'd like to, they can look at our guidelines that are available on our website. They can begin talking amongst themselves with the group that they're based in, and they can give us a call and talk to us about their work. A part of the work that I do is we get out of the office as much as we can, and we go and meet with people who are doing social change work in the islands. We like to visit our grantees, who have been many over the years, 35 years, a lot of different grantees. And we also like to meet with people who are considering applying to us for the first time. We go to different kinds of social justice events, so we're visible in the community, we have a face, we are presenting ourselves as accessible and understanding of people's struggles and issues. And the door's always open.
Good, yeah. I wanted to ask, in terms of those grants, Nancy, how huge are they, or how small?
Well, I've been with Hawaii People's Fund myself and staff for not quite 5 years. And when I began, our largest grant, our maximum amount was $2,000. Over these 5 years, it's grown. The maximum grant is now $5,000. And I really want to stress that as a grant-making organization for social justice, we're actually two-pronged. The other prong of our program is as a social change philanthropy. We don't have this huge endowment from some publishing family or something that we can make these gifts from. We raise the money from the community. And so people who support social change, who support justice and know about Hawaii People's Fund donate money, and we pool that money and give that out in grants. And it's such a magical thing. The longer I'm there, and I knew about People's Fund for years, I gave money, I went to events, and I actually worked on projects and wrote applications for grants. So I was very familiar with it, but I think I didn't appreciate the magic of the fundraising side until I was working here, because I'm personally so passionate about many issues, and I can't be involved in all of those. And if you have a family, children, a job, or all of those, going to school, you can't do all the things you really care about. And this is a way to kind of support all the different issues that you care about. And you can, say like, well, I really like Friends of Sabile, here's $100, which I may or may not get a tax deduction for. Me personally, I don't care. Some people that's important to. And then there's another group I care about. Well, I already gave my $100 away. If you give the $100 to Hawaii People's Fund, then 10 groups end up getting, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 each. And your money is part of each of those, and yet it's a large grant for each of those groups. So it's a way to really pool our resources. It's a collective. It's a progressive collective, and it's redistributing wealth. So it's very exciting to me.
So, your motto is change, not charity. What does that mean? I mean, in terms of the practicality of it and what those groups that were funded by you, the grantees, have done, if you could give us some examples.
Well, I'll give you a couple, and I think Richard might want to speak to that too, because he works so much with the grantees. But, change, not charity is not demeaning of charitable efforts in any way. But as a social justice fund, really what we're looking at is people who can get to the root causes of social problems. The Band-Aid effect is important when someone's bleeding. You want to do something to stop that, but it doesn't have a long-term impact. So there are many groups out there that do the Red Cross type of work on different issues, and that's great. But really what we want to address is how do we eliminate the need for those bandages down the line? You can give someone a meal today, but how do we get at the root of poverty? Why are people homeless? So those are the issues that we want to go for in terms of change versus charity. I often think about this one organization. When I came to work, there was a long list of who got grants from Hawaii People's Fund over the years. One of the groups that got a grant is now here at the university in the Student Services Center, the Women's Center. It started out at the old YWCA across the road, and a little office upstairs, the University Women's Center, struggling for support, not just financial support, but really to be a living part of the university. And they're on the list of early, they got a grant from Hawaii People's Fund early on to help keep them going. And now, they don't need us. They're stable, they're fixed, and they're part of the system.
Yeah, that's good. In a positive way. I mean, not part of the system.
Part of the system so that they're here to stay and always addressing issues that are of concern for women, and they do some really important work.
Yeah, they sure do. Yeah, so that's a good example. Could you give other examples, Richard?
To tail on to something that Nancy said, one of the things that we find working in the field of social change broadly is that the kinds of things that are funded on the cutting edge are hopefully going to become more mainstream eventually. Some historical things that some of your viewers are probably familiar with are women's issues in general, like women's centers all over the United States and the world. other kinds of advocacy and care or work, like people working to combat domestic violence, people working to fight the stigma of HIV and other diseases, people working with youth and with the elderly and their needs. And some of these things are way more mainstream than they used to be. One of the kinds of groups that we like to work with is engaged in advocacy work. And advocacy is a form of social change, along with several other phrases that I'll throw out right now. One is mobilization, and another one is direct action. Another one is community organizing. And all of these are different forms of social change work. Advocacy is often characterized by a core group of people who are working for change on behalf of a larger constituency. And they educate their constituency, and at times they mobilize members of their constituency to show up at the Capitol or to call their legislators or their Congress people and to engage in activities on behalf of the larger group. Sometimes we engage in, and people engage in direct action, where they show up and do a demonstration or a protest, as certainly happens a lot. These are examples of some of the kinds of work that we fund.
Yeah, good. Morgan, I'm curious about some of the events. I mean, you know, what is the program called first? And give us an example of one or two of the events that also link what Nancy was talking about, like the Palestinian issue, Israeli issue on the one hand, with what's happening in Hawaii and so on, because some of those events speak to that kind of linkage.
Yeah, I really appreciate actually some of the things that you've been saying, and I think that it is so important to try to get to those root causes, because we really can't change anything if we don't really understand what's causing these kind of violences or these problems within societies. So the name of this symposium is Who Are the Palestinians? Understanding the Nakba. And the point of that title is to really ask, do we know anything about Palestinians? And I think that frequently our image of who Palestinians are, where Palestine is, or what the conflict is reduced to a single image, a very violent image. And this symposium hopes to kind of explode that and teach people a little bit more about the humanity and the people who are involved in this conflict and why this conflict is going on and how we could demand an end to that. So the second part of the title is Understanding the Nakba. Nakba means catastrophe, and this year is the 60th anniversary since the catastrophe of Palestine, which is 1948, when there was forced dispossession of about half of the population of Palestine. It's also the same year and very much connected to Israel's independence. And so we'd like on this anniversary, the 60th anniversary of the catastrophe, the Nakba, we'd like to ask what has happened in the 60 years since the Nakba, what is going on this day, and where do we see the future of Palestine and Israel going, and how can we affect that? And I think it's very pertinent to the United States generally, because it is our tax dollars that are funding much of this conflict, this violence, and we have a responsibility as funders of this violence to challenge it and to understand where our money is going. But more specifically to Hawaii, and Nancy said earlier that, you know, our history of colonialism here, there are links that can be made. There are kind of trends, colonial trends that we can try to understand and learn from these stories that have been greatly repressed. You know, it's only recently in Hawaii that the histories are being rewritten. You know, Aloha Betrayed is a great example of a text that is trying to challenge the narrative that has been constructed and saying there is another narrative that has been completely erased and we should acknowledge that, and we should learn from that, and we should change our future through this knowledge. And I think that Palestine, you know, is in that same kind of, on that same line of thought, that we are only hearing certain perspectives, and they're very limited. And it's time to learn a little bit more So this symposium, it's 3 weeks long, and it's at 4 university campuses. So it begins at HPU, and that's February 26th and 28th, and all this information is available on a website. And that section at HPU attempts to kind of get to the 20th, 21st century history.
Yeah, we can even show the website.
Yeah, that'd be great. You know, maybe some people, don't write www. I know we always write that, but don't write that. The website is just Hawaiʻi and Palestine.googlepages.com. Oh, and we even have an image of the homepage.
Yeah.
So it begins at HPU, and it looks at the history, and there's some film showings there, and there's also a great panel that will be on the 21st century history, and that includes HPU's Dr. Prim, and also we have a speaker flying in from the mainland named Dr. Damuni, Zahi Damuni. And then the next week it moves here to the University of Hawai'i at Mānoa, to the Center for Hawaiian Studies. And we'll have some films there and also a panel with UH's Dr. Ibrahim Aoude and also with Dr. Haunani K. Trask.
Yeah.
She'll be speaking, and that is attempting to make some links between Hawaii and Palestine as colonized spaces, and looking at how occupation, how colonialism is functioning, and what we can learn and how we can challenge that. And then we're going to move to Kapiolani Community College for 1 day. And we actually have some Palestinian speakers who will be talking specifically about what life is like living in the West Bank and Gaza, what those experiences are, and sharing that with the folks there. And then finally, it'll come here to UH Mānoa again, and that section is on future prospects for peace and also current prospects for peace. Why is there not peace in the Holy Land right now? And what is the U.S. role? How are we personally involved in the lack of peace that we see in the Holy Land, in Israel and Palestine? And then finally, actually, there's a final lecture on Friday, I think that's March 13th, at Leeward Community College. And that's part of the International Education Festival. And the speaker for that is Dr. Jess Ghanam, and he's coming in from the mainland as well. He's the executive director of Aoude, an organization, a Palestinian organization there. So it should be really pretty incredible, and very grateful to have the funding to bring these speakers over here and to offer this kind of education here in Hawaii, because you know, one of the things when I talk to Palestinians, I often bring up, oh, I'm living in Hawaii right now. Did you know this and this about Hawaii? Do you know the history and the present situation in Hawaii? And people always say, it's been colonized, it's occupied. I've never heard of that. And it's the same thing here. You know, what we know about Palestine is so limited. So striking up this conversation between the two places and hopefully learning and challenging injustice in this way is what we're aiming to do in this 3-week symposium. So please check out the website.
Yeah. What is it again?
It's Hawaiʻi and Palestine.googlepages.com. All the events are free. All the events are open to the public. So we encourage all of Oahu to turn out for this.
Yeah.
We're prepared.
Yeah, so that's good, and so the People's Fund has played a central role in bringing that about.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I mean, this is the thing that we're talking about in terms of, if not research, it's something akin to that allows people to better understand what's going on from people who have done this kind of work in terms of researching it, etc.
When you talk about grassroots and bottom-up change, which is what we're all about, changing public policy is critical, but it doesn't happen overnight. You have to change people's attitudes and thinking first. And the only way you can do that is providing good information for them. And so this is like really a bottom-up kind of thing, where hopefully what will end up is peace in the Middle East. But we can't just go there.
Yeah.
People have to understand how we got to where we are now, and seeing that shift in attitude. It's really interesting to read archival documents at Hawaii People's Fund, where the issues in the early 1970s were not any different than the issues we're looking at now, and you just go, oh no, 35 years and it's still the same problems.
Yeah.
but it's really incremental. People have a much better understanding of the issues now. There have been changes. In the early 1970s, people didn't even know how to interact with policymakers. And now, not only are there more and more people at places like the legislature and city council, but you can get it on television. And you can watch the hearings, and you can go on the computer and download any bill, and you can email your policymakers in Washington, D.C. So things are shifting gradually. And when Hawaii People's Fund began, Kaho'olawe was still the target island. And it didn't happen overnight, and people from Protect Kaho'olawe know best. It took 25 years or so to get it back, but when they first started, they also wanted to include Makua, and strategically thought, we better focus on one place. We'll have a better chance of success. And it took a long time, and it's not finished yet because it's still so riddled with unexploded ordnance, but now there are people who are really trying to reclaim Makua.
Right, yeah. So this strategy has worked, and the People's Fund was also involved in funding those kinds of
Back in those
activities.
days, yeah.
I'm thinking in terms of what's happening in Hawaii and the things that the Hawaii People's Fund funds. We have to look at some of the problems. For instance, I remember in 1970, housing was a big problem, traffic, access to the beaches, and so forth. And now what do we see? Housing problems, traffic, access to the beaches. Perhaps they manifest themselves in different ways, but it is the same kind of problem, in different form. So that, I think, is critical in terms of the People's Fund coming to existence, seeing that no one has been funding things for social change. And therefore, here we are, the People's Fund. I mean, that's what the People's Fund said, and that was the name before. It became Hawaii People's Fund. Here we are, the People's Fund. We want to do something, about that. But now I want to ask, in terms of maybe in terms of historic perspective on that, does, for instance, the board of directors deal with those kinds of discussions to better understand things, or how might that reflect that in me historically and currently in terms of this board? Anyone? Do you know? I mean.
Well, I'm at all the board meetings, so I can say that we have some really rich discussions. They're generally not organized beforehand to say, tonight our topic is, because we're getting to be a fairly complex organization just in terms of the infrastructure, and the responsibilities of the board of directors has to do with, we just finished our annual review by an accountant, and we have to pay send in our federal tax forms, and there's a responsibility of the board legally to take care of these kinds of issues as well, and decide how we're going to accomplish what's our budget going to be. So there's a lot of fiscal duties, but we also look at all the grants that we're giving out and have a lot of discussion around the things that the grantees are working on or applicants. And we also occasionally will have some special arena that we choose to promote and request proposals within that arena. We don't do it a lot, because I think there's some pitfalls in having that so focused. But we did receive some funding last year for media justice. It was an area that I knew nothing about. I was a little hesitant to accept the money and take on this task. But the more I read about it, the more I realized there aren't a lot of active groups working around issues of media reform, media ownership, constituency-led media, and we have some amazing models. I mean, I think this program is an example of community television that a lot of places don't have. And we have 6 stations for community television on this island. So we accepted a grant of about $25,000, and part of that was for giving out back into grants for media, and part of it was to hold a conference, which we did first. And we brought in panelists who have expertise in this arena. So we had many, many conversations leading up to that, forming committees, and then putting on a conference that had workshops and plenary sessions, all to talk about issues of media and where the consolidation of media ownership is also consolidating the information we get, which is hindering our ability to really progress as a society. So, and then we gave out we're continuing to give out grants in that area.
So I understand you have targeted donations at times, right?
Less so targeted. It came to us that way.
Okay.
Yeah, it was offered to us to use for media.
Okay. So you would accept targeted donations.
We accept targeted donations, but again, it's troublesome. There's what you call restricted and unrestricted funding. If you get if somebody came to us tomorrow and said, you know, I'd like to give you $10,000 for grant making to help support groups that are working on gay and lesbian issues. Well, that's great because we do support that kind of work, but we don't get a lot of proposals for that. So we could be sitting on that $10,000 for a long time, waiting, you know, and encouraging the community to come up with projects, but it can be challenging. If they said, here's $10,000 to fund your work, we're still going to be out there encouraging people to do all these kinds of projects, but we have that $10,000 ready to give out.
So you prefer the flexibility, and I think it makes sense. Because you already like targeting certain programs yourself. You go you might want to talk about that because you go to the community.
Well, about gay and lesbian issues, as Nancy just mentioned, to take this a little bit further, I was just telling Nancy earlier this afternoon that we have received quite a number of inquiries. I won't give you the exact number, I'm not engaging in competition, of people who are telling us that they're preparing applications for the March 1st deadline. And there are at least one group that's working on LGBT issues that's developing an application. We funded some work that's LGBT related that's from a different group last fall in our grant cycle. And so it's something that happens, but it may not happen to the extent that this particular donor, would be interested in. We, as we've said earlier, we fund broad categories of work. People can be working in any one of these particular areas, or sometimes groups engage in some work that has some crossover. Some of the issues that we fund are economic justice, peace and international solidarity, as we've talked about tonight, cultural activism, human rights, civil rights, environmental justice, and political organizing. And then we look at the kinds of tactics and strategies that people have planned in their work. And we also look at the ways they're analyzing the opportunities that might exist, or the challenges or the problems that exist in the community. And we're looking to help them discuss that real clearly, so it's very explicit in their language, what it is they see and how they're planning on doing it, and what kinds of seeds the social change work may sow in the ground. Morgan's talking a little bit tonight about broadening our awareness, all of our awareness, about understanding the Palestinians and the Nakba and the struggles that have happened over the last 60 years. And it's only after we plant seeds and we nurture, these understandings that we can develop broad-based social change. But it takes a long time.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, I wanted to ask you, Morgan, to me it's not like here are the donors and here are the grantees, because grantees can become donors as well. So I just want to your opinion on this, and from this experience that you have through Sabil and through specifically this particular event that has been organized, and you've been central to that. Of course, like when People's Fund is recognized as one of the main central figures in putting this about in terms of funding. Would you see that at some point maybe people who might be involved in this, or people in Sabil who become donors, or in fact, have you gotten donations from people in Friends of Sabil, for instance? Yeah. So that kind of stuff. Could you speak to how you see that? Yeah.
I mean, I think it's really important to fund these kinds of groups who can go out into the community and find these very valuable projects and help them financially. And it's not just financial, because also this kind of experience, coming in and learning how to write for the emergency grant, learning how to prepare the application and write this proposal, has been absolutely central to my securing other funding for this symposium, and helping me to understand not only the processes through which I have to pass in order to acquire funding, but more centrally, learning how to write, one of the questions asks what kind of social change you see this project being able to effect. And that's something that I learned how to compose through this experience. So I would like to, I'm a student. I'm a poor student right now, and I really value who's helped the work that I'm doing. I value those sources, and I hope at some point to be one of those people who gets to return back and say thank you, and here's some money, and please, continue your great work. And I really hope that one of the things that comes out of this symposium is that not only are people getting educated, but they're also finding venues to continue that education and to put that into work. So hopefully one of the things that people will come out of this saying is, I need to do more. I need to learn more, and I need to do something. And I would love to see that coming out as financial support, and going to, the People's Fund, the Hawaiʻi People's Fund is a place where I'm sure that Sabil will be returning again in the future to continue this work. So I think that that's really essential. To participate fully, not just to take, but also to give back into that work.
I'd like to say something. Ibrahim, we always hope that people can create very compelling and challenging grant applications for us to review. We really want to get a large number of some really interesting and clear proposals. The more proposals that are dynamic and exciting to us, the more we can go to our donors and say, look at all this work that we're able to fund, and look at all this work that we had to say, no, I'm sorry, we can't fund them.
Yeah, that's good. I want to shift it a little bit in terms of how do you contact your donors or your constituency as such? I know you have like newsletters and this and that.
Yes,
so could you say something about it? In fact, we have some that we can display as well, and you probably would like to talk about that.
I'll just share a little bit, because to my mind, communication is a critical part of any social change, social justice work. And I also believe that when someone gives you money to support the work you're doing, you want to tell them what you did with their money.
Yeah, and we can show it. Actually now.
I think we have some that we can display, and I brought a couple too. So that's we have 4 times a year we have a newsletter that comes out. Twice a year, the newsletter, and the one that's showing now says Fall Cycle Grants. That's our most recent. Right after the grant cycle, we report on what grants we gave out. How
is that fall or winter?
That was the fall.
Okay.
And that's the that was
spring.
The fall cycle grants, but the issue comes out in the winter.
I see. Yeah, right.
Because it's following our fall grants. So this is in between the winter and summer that that announce the grant cycles, we have our spring and fall issues that have additional stories about our grantees. And we try and have at least 4, sometimes 8 or 9 stories about this is what the grantees are doing. So it isn't just this is who got money, but more information, photos if they give us photos. So we really want to share as much as we can about what's going on in the community. And then once a year we have an opportunity for all of our donors and anyone who didn't give us money too, to come and meet all of our grantees.
Yeah.
These are our brochures that we have 2 brochures that we've developed. Funding Social Change in Hawaii is our general brochure, and it just talks about the Hawaii People's Fund and what we do and how we do it. Leaving a Gentler Footprint is longer, almost 20 pages, and it's a socially conscious visitor's guide to Hawaii. Kind of highlights the issues that we face here in the islands for people that are just visiting or perhaps live here part of the year. It's interesting, even for many of us activists, when we go on vacation, we're not just leaving our work, but we're leaving our activism behind. And we stay in a hotel and we forget that the people serving us might be working 2 or 3 jobs to keep their families going, and so to not lose touch with the issues that you care about when you travel to a place that everyone calls paradise. So we created that book for visitors as well.
Good. That's an interesting one. I remember sometimes demonstrations or rallies, etc., and then you find some tourists supporting a strike, and so on. Say, yeah, we are with you, and so on.
They just see you and they join you, and they never would have guessed on their vacation they'd end up at a labor rally. But I've been there many times too. And I just started to mention that once a year there's a chance for everyone to come and meet all of our grantees, and maybe we'll let Richard talk a little bit about that event.
Yeah.
This is an event that we now call Presentation Day, and we'll be doing it for the 3rd time in 2008. It's now scheduled for May 17th at the YWCA on Richard Street, rooms 201, 205, from 2:30 to 5 p.m. in the afternoon. And we'll be sharing more information about that in the coming months. But the bottom line is that we made 46 grants in 2007. And these grantees are invited to set up exhibits about the work that they're doing and how our donors' funds were used to support their work. And so we want to have them see each other in the same room. It's not too often that people get out and spend, a few hours together in the same space. So hopefully if there are 2 or 3 people there from Morgan's organization, Friends of Sabile, and there's another organization, say, that's involved in Hawaiian sovereignty issues, they might be across the room, but people can, move around and talk with each other about their related issues.
So it is educational even at that event.
And inspirational. And really inspirational.
It's like a big expo, it's almost the wedding month. It's in May, and if you go over to Blaisdell, you might go to the wedding expo, but if you come over to the YWCA, you can come to the Justice Expo.
Right, and
it's also
that's good,
It's an opportunity also for our donors to have direct contact with the people who their money is supporting, and for the people who we're supporting to have information, not only that, say, displays that are talking about their work, but they might also want to be raising not their own funds through memberships, perhaps, or some people sell things like T-shirts. Some people have videos that are playing on a DVD loop, and I would say, some people just have really exciting things going on.
No, I wanted to say, I remember in the old days, the cycle would be for $20,000 only, or maybe whole year 30,000, and so on. And now it has grown over the past several years. Could you speak a little bit to that and what happens so that?
Well, I mean, we're gradually growing our donor base, and people are giving more money, and maybe that will change because the economy is shifting, but we hope that we will continue to get new donors and more donors. We've also found in the last few years it's very challenging. I've been working on it really hard, and we're not the most popular kind of agency to get money from foundations, but a few foundations are interested in what we've been doing. And actually, some of them have even approached us. So just most recently, a foundation in California offered us money to give out in grants. It's a way that their funds can have impact in Hawaii, and they trust our vetting process in the grant-making committee. So we got $15,000 from them to give out in grants. So yeah, in 2007, we granted out over $90,000 of Hawaii People's Fund money. We also began a new partnership with the Hawaii Community Foundation, which has the word community in their name, and they've been doing community-based funding over the years and altering it in different ways, and most recently it was called the Mo Better Together program. And they came to us and said, we really like the way you've been funding community projects. We'd like to work with you. So if a community project looks at their website for a grant, they're going to get sent over to our website. They fill out our proposal. They're looked at by our grant-making committee, but the Hawaii Community Foundation will also look at them, and some of them, they will add some money to the grant. So a group might get $5,000 maximum from People's Fund. They also might get another $5,000 from the Community Foundation and end up with a grant of $10,000.
Yeah, that's interesting, yeah. Did you want to say something?
No, I want to get in on that.
Because I was thinking, you are currently going through small meetings with people in the community, donors, also grantees, or just donors, or what is it?
Well, we're continuing to do both, and Richard, as he mentioned, spends a lot of time talking with grantees. He also does outreach workshops, both throughout Oahu and as we can afford it, going to neighbor islands as well, just to let community groups know that we're here and available, and talk them through the process in general about how to apply for funding, and then make ourselves available to go into more depth if they have a draft they want us to look at or run ideas by. At the same time, we have different levels of working with our donors and with the broader community who aren't donors because they never heard of us. So we're always trying new things, and one of the more recent things that we started doing that you mentioned is having very small, intimate dinners with people who do support us already, and have some conversation back and forth about how do you think we're doing, and what are comments that you have towards our work, and also what are ideas that you have to help us grow.
I just want to say the dinners are not paid from the People's Fund
dinners
money,
are coming also from this grant that we got from California.
Completely separate.
And they're, when we run out of that money, we won't do that anymore. But in the meantime, we'll probably do it every month or two throughout this year. And we've got some great ideas, and even got an invitation to appear on this program. So thank you.
My pleasure. But also why I'm asking about the grantees, because Morgan would have a lot of ideas, etc., that would be good to be shared by everybody else who is in on that kind of suggestions and this kind of program that you are doing. Yeah, in fact, we have caller Lance from Hilo. So Lance, you're on the air, and we have a few more minutes, so please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Wonderful to have your program. I'm
Thank
a
you.
volunteer at the Kuitahi Mediation Center in downtown Hilo, and mediation is certainly a prime mover in attaining peace and so forth. And I'm trying to help them get money through grants. Which just about 25% of their income is through grants. And I was wondering if you're open to the prospects of assisting the mediation center. They especially need funds for training. Right now, all the volunteer mediators have to pay $250 to $300 for a 32-hour weekend course. And if you could provide money for that, that would fairly stressful type of volunteering.
Yeah.
It's very important to the people involved, but they do need to have trained people to help engage.
Yeah, good. Thanks, Lance. We'll now get the answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't plant Lance, but this is exactly the kind of phone call that Richard might get in a day. So in the most abbreviated form.
Lance and people like you, what we'd like to have you do is look at our website, hawaiipeoplesfund.org, look at the grant making page, and there are 3 different links on that page that I think you'll find of interest. One is the guidelines, so look for the document that explains what our grant guidelines are, and then really kind of study them. Talk over the guidelines with the people that you're working with and come to some understanding of how appropriate it is for your organization to submit an application. Once you make that decision as a group, then someone starts writing the application, and then people start consulting with you again as you develop questions and making sure that you understand what our values are and how we make our decisions. We call that our criteria. Then please feel free to call us and talk with us, and we might send you back and to talk with members of your group again to further develop the application. Our criteria are very clear, laid out on our guidelines. Our application is right there at our guidelines. The emergency application that Morgan completed for Friends of Sabio is also available right there at our website.
Yeah, that's good answer. So now Lance can know what to do and so forth. And if he has questions, etc., he is welcome to talk with you folks, and you guide him through.
We're very happy to talk with people, even if they're not eligible for a grant from Hawaii People's Fund. We might have some referrals for other places they could seek funding.
And this happened before, and right? I mean,
many times.
Yeah. So that's good. So I mean, if no here, but yes over there, yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, and so there are always plans to increase the donors base, right? I mean, some of these things we talked about, yeah. But it's impressive that from say $25,000-$30,000 a year to $90,000. It's not much, but if it is targeted properly, it can do wonders. Especially, it's not only the money, but also the experience that Morgan was talking about, and so forth. Yeah, we still have like 1 minute or so. So, any closing thoughts, Nancy, Richard, Morgan?
Well, I just started hearing a song in my head when you were talking about it's not much, but it's still, we who believe in justice shall not rest. Sweet Honey in the Rock song. And there's going to be work for us to do for a long time, and we invite everyone to come into the circle. The size of the donation is not important. We're just trying to build a movement, and check our website out, give us a call, and come to the Understanding the Nakba events.
Yes.
More people, the better. More people, the merrier. Supporting People's Fund.
Thank you so much.
Well,
Graham.
thank you very much. We're flat out of time, I suppose, and I hope it's been good for our viewers as well. And thank you very much again. And good luck with your program event. And mahalo nui loa, and see you next month. Aloha.
Aloha.